Alright guys, so today we're going to check out the Moondrop Dusk, and more specifically this is the Moondrop Crinacle Dusk, because this is a collaboration between both Moondrop and Crinacle, and this is kind of a follow-up to the last time Moondrop worked with Crinacle with the Blessing 2 Dusk. But although this one's kind of based around the Blessing 3, they didn't want to call it the Blessing 3 Dusk because there are definitely some things in the Dusk that separates it a pretty good bit away from the Blessing 3, which we'll talk about. Now, as far as the pricing on these, they do come in at $359, which makes them $40 more than the Blessing 3. And I think with what they've added into these and what they're giving you, and you'll find out by the time we're finished with this video, I think the $40 is definitely justified. Now, also keep in mind, because this is a collaboration with Crinacle, he's gonna get a cut of every sale of these as well. So we are kind of paying for that. Now the Blessing 3 used 2 isobaric dynamic drivers and 4 balanced armature drivers, where the Dusk is using those same 2 isobaric dynamic drivers. It's using 2 Knowles balanced armature drivers, and this time it's using 2 planar micro tweeters. And this was just because they wanted it to get tuned a very specific way, and it took using these planar micro tweeters to get it just right, which we'll talk about once we get to the sound. Now, the design of these, in my opinion, are very interesting. Now, the shell, for the most part, kind of mimics the Blessing 3, but this is a little bit larger because of the components that they're adding into these. But the outside is actually a forged carbon fiber. It just looks really good, and at certain angles it kind of looks like wood. It does come with a pretty nice like pleather or leather looking case. It comes with 2 different type of 2-pin connection cables. Now the 2 different cables, you are getting one that has a normal 3.5mm headphone jack, but the one that I think really kind of separates this pair from a lot of other Moondrop IEMs is the cable that has a built-in DSP. Now this is using a USB-C connection, which is obviously gonna work with the new iPhones and pretty much every Android phone and pretty much every computer out there. So it's pretty universal, but having that DSP is kind of just allowing them to do some extra tuning. It's basically a digital signal processor. It's amplifying it a little bit. It's giving it a little bit more volume. So this is going to keep you from needing to buy an amp. Like if you're going to use it, you know, with the 3.5mm cable, that way I would recommend an amp. But the DSP is doing all of that for you. And what it's also doing is it's allowing these to work with the Moondrop Link 2.0 app, which you normally don't get with IEMs. And so you're getting some different EQ options that they went in and tuned themselves. And some of those options are the Bass Plus, which is a personal favorite, especially if you're a bass head. There is a V tuning, there's, you know, the typical Harman tuning, and there's a diffuse tilted. And that's trying to kind of like pull back on some of the, you know, bass and the treble that's a little more aggressive in the other tunings. So if you're somebody that likes, say, more flatter reference style, I would recommend that tuning, but I'm still gonna say, even in that tuning, it's not flat. There's still a pretty good bit of boost in the low end and the treble, which again, we'll talk about a little bit more when we get to the sound. Now also within the box, you get 3 sets of silicone ear tips. You also get an airline adapter. You don't really see this too much with IEMs and headphones like they used to be, but I was kind of surprised that there's no 1/4" adapter, because if you're gonna use that normal 3.5mm headphone jack, especially a lot of people that have other DACs and amps, a lot of those, you know, only use that 1/4" plug-in. So it would have been nice to have that in here, but I think most people that own those amps and DACs anyway probably already have a 1/4" adapter, but it's kind of a surprise that they don't have it in the box. Now these do have a frequency response of 10 Hertz all the way to 24 kilohertz, and it has an impedance level of 14.5 ohms. And to kind of dumb that down some, if you're going to use these with that normal 3.5mm headphone jack, it's very easy to get a decent amount of volume out of these. And I'm gonna say that you don't necessarily need an amp. You can just plug straight into devices and you'll be fine. But to really kind of take advantage of these, if you're gonna use that 3.5mm headphone jack, I recommend an amp. That's the way that you're gonna get the boosted bass, and you're gonna be able to get a little bit more out of the mids and the treble. But I kind of always say that with any headphone or IEM that I've reviewed in the past. But how do these sound overall? Well, they actually sound pretty great. They definitely are very comparable to the Eco OH1s and the OH10s that I'm a huge fan of. when it comes to bass. Now, most IEMs usually kind of take the approach of being a little closer to reference, a little more analytical to the audio, things that's kind of coming in with an extremely tight bass. They usually don't like to give you a lot of sub bass or give you that subwoofer type feel. And these don't hold back when it comes to that. I was really surprised with the tuning just as it is out of the box using that DSP cable, because there's definitely plenty of low end. But where it gets even better, using that Moondrop Link 2.0 app, when I went to the Bass Plus, although it dips the volume down a little bit here, the low end is insane. This definitely reaches that subwoofer type level. It's a little bit looser, obviously. It's not trying to be as tight or accurate. It's just trying to give you as much bass as possible. And the V tuning still kind of sticks to this. It tightens the bass up a little bit, but you're getting a brighter treble. So I kind of found myself switching between the Bass Plus and the V-shape tuning. Those were my two favorite. The Harman tuning on these I didn't find particularly great. I didn't think it really did anything special. It just sounded like a basic type of tuning, and there wasn't really anything to get excited about here. And the diffuse tilted, I don't feel like really kind of pulled everything back as much as I thought it would. Again, I felt like things still had a pretty boosted bass and a brighter treble. So I don't think this is going to be a pair that I would recommend for purists, unless you're just going to use that normal 3.5mm headphone jack and plug it into your own equipment. That way you have a little bit more control. But again, it's, I think, tuned to be a little bit more fun and aggressive, which I am a huge fan of. I think this is made to just really enjoy your music, not necessarily pick apart everything. Although you really can hear all of the details, because the mids have a slight boost to them where vocalists stood out. Even in aggressive genres like metal or rock, anything where there's a lot going on, I definitely never felt like the bass was rolling over anything. I didn't feel like the mids took a step back. It always had a nice presence to it. And the treble on these were always clean. Now, it's not bright or harsh. I kind of expected these to have that kind of tuning, but it's detailed enough that you can hear everything clearly. It has a somewhat bright sound to it, but it's pulled back enough that, again, it doesn't reach that sibilance in the S's or just that overly, aggressive treble that kind of makes other IEMs pretty fatiguing. Now, when it comes to the soundstage and the sound imaging, this is definitely not the most open IEM that I've heard. It still made me feel like I was in a pretty large room, and then being able to tell where different sounds were coming from, I never had an issue with these. So my overall opinion is this. It's definitely going to come across pricey if you compare these to a lot of the other budget IEMs that I normally check out on the channel. But I think where the value is, especially if you're going to compare these to the much more expensive IEMs out there, is that DSP cable is a huge plus. And the tuning of these just is tuned in a way that I think anybody just wanting to enjoy their music is going to be extremely happy with. Again, I think the only people I really wouldn't recommend these for is somebody that's just looking for something that's kind of flat and lifeless, something that you would use in a studio, because the audio in these are definitely colored just the way it is out of the box. And the convenience, again, of not having to buy an amp by having that DSP cable already saves you a lot more money that you would normally have to spend when you buy other pairs of IEMs. So the value definitely comes in there. Again, keep in mind you are paying Crinacle a little bit of money when you buy these, because it is a collab between him and Moondrop. Seeing bigger companies work with other creators is always something I'm interested in, because it allows you to kind of get a taste of what that creator really looks for in a product. I think this just kind of reflects maybe what Crinacle likes in tuning. And when other, creators do things like this, it's just always something that interests me. But guys, that's my video on the brand new Moondrop Crinacle Dusk. Thank you so much for checking out this video. Thank you so much for checking out all the other videos. And as always, make sure to stay tuned for more.